The Bob Murphy Show, episode 433.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Bob Murphy Show. Today I am pleased to be speaking with Patri Friedman, who I'm sure many of you already know, but for those who don't, let me just give a little bit of his background. Patri Friedman runs Pronomos Capital, the world's first charter city venture fund, and has been a leader in the competitive governance space for over 20 years. Back in 2008, he started the Seasteading Institute with funding from Peter Thiel, and that's where many of you probably, ended with your understanding or knowledge of what Patri was working on, because, he had been making the rounds back then, talking about the seasteading, the idea of like having libertarian-ish cities floating on the water, like had all those sorts of advantages in terms of international law. But since then, he has moved beyond that. For example, in 2011, he co-founded Future Cities Development, which had the first MOU for a modern charter city with Honduras. And then in 2018, he started Pronomos Capital. Patri has investments, advisory positions, and board memberships across the competitive governance space and does talks, interviews, and events regularly around the world. Previously, he spent 10 years coding at Google, ran an angel fund since 2011, and he's got degrees in math, computer science, and business. So the main thing that we discuss in this episode is I ask him, a bunch of us, including me, knew of you, that Patri's out there, got funding from Peter Thiel working on the seasteading project. And then now I know he shifted focus, so he tells that story as to what happened and what he's doing now. So without further ado, here is my discussion with Patri Friedman. Patri, welcome to the Bob Murphy Show.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, glad to have you back. So I think I said in the email when I invited you back on that what had put you back in my front and center was I recently was doing some musings about, hey, 10, 15 years from now, the world's going to look a lot different. I think, the rise of AI, but also affordable little robot armies, not for, the middle-class family, but for, billionaire guys is going to be, and I painted this whole scenario. And then part of it was it involved seasteading. And then I thought, let me get Patri back on here. So when last we left, I know a lot of people had associated you with the seasteading project. And that was sort of like for a bunch of us, like, hey, if this whole academia or voting harder thing doesn't work, Patri's got this thing over here going on. So can you just bring us up to speed on, what happened with that and so forth?
Sure. Yeah. So, I started playing with the seasteading ideas in 2001. I wrote my first book, just self-published, put it online in the early 2000s, and got funding from Peter in 2007 to start the Institute.
That's Peter Thiel, just for people don't know.
Peter Thiel, and ran it for a few years. And it was incredible at getting attention, at opening people's minds, getting them to think about, like, why can't we start new countries?
Yeah. Can I just stop you? Even again, we're assuming a lot of inside baseball, but just for somebody who they don't know what this is, the idea was what, in international waters, you realized that if you could get something that was viable, like it was a lot easier than trying to like break away from an existing jurisdiction.
That's right. All land is claimed by existing countries because, even if the land itself is worthless, like a rock in the ocean, it still extends their resource rights out to a wider zone. So all land is claimed by countries. And, when I started exploring this stuff in the 2000s, countries didn't have any interest in special economic zone, anything more than the vanilla SEZ type of experiments. But on the ocean, it's not that the high seas are lawless. This is like a common misconception, but the way it works is that every ship has to register with a country and fly its flag. And then when that ship is 12 miles or more from shore, it's sort of like a floating embassy of that country. Okay. Like legally, you're under their jurisdiction. And this is actually a very competitive market even though it is limited only to nation states, like most nation states have flag registries, and any country in the world can do it. And it's a temporary virtual association, meaning like, it's like you sign up for a cell phone plan or an insurer or something. Like you sign up with a provider and then you pay them some money and you get to fly their flag. So it's actually this like incredible competitive system for basically like franchising countries' sovereignty. So it's not that the high seas are lawless, but that there is a structure. And so there are some countries that like just are happy to take any ship registering there, and they don't really care what you do as long as you don't break. There's international laws about things like pollution, drugs, some things that you have to follow because everyone has to follow it. But where if you don't, make trouble or break those laws, like they don't care what you do. So it looked appealing then, and the ocean's the new frontier. And I observed, like with America, we've often had new societies start on frontiers and experiment with new forms of governance, whether it's way back with the great city states or the founding of America. It's always been important, like forming new polities is how you get to try new things. So the idea of seasteading was, hey, let's go build on the frontier. Let's go live on the ocean, as a way of trying out new ways of living together.
Was the original plan to have like humongous cruise ships, or like a platform that was just floating, or that it was moored like down on the seafloor, or all the above?
Yeah, we were exploring a lot of different options. We did kind of a full engineering design and cost estimate on a floating platform, something a bit like an oil rig, but where it like the pillars would go down to flotation and not to the seafloor. So it would either, drift or need to be anchored. But we also looked into cruise ship options. There is one condo cruise ship, the World, but financially it did very poorly, lost a lot of money for the investors. Like the ship, they still haven't been able to like fill the ship. It's been like 10 or 20 years. So that's tough. And overall seasteading was incredible at getting the idea out there. And I think that there's some versions of it that could probably work. Like I think doing a medical tourism cruise ship would be a great idea. Like all you have to do to be under that legal system I described of flying a flag is your itinerary has to touch two different countries. So if you just went between two U.S. ports, you're under U.S. law. Like the flagging doesn't matter, even if you're out past 12 miles. But if you just went from like, whatever, Seattle to Vancouver, or like LA to like Mexico, you could do medical procedures, using doctors from other countries who, like studies show, perform at like the same rate, but are far less expensive, offer non-FDA approved medical treatments, things like that. So I think there's some neat stuff that you could do, but going back to like the cost estimates we did for that platform we designed, the ocean is just so expensive, and container ships work because we have them highly optimized. Like the cost to move stuff across the oceans is minuscule, and oil platforms work because they're pumping out liquid gold, and it's actually worth it to deal with this super difficult environment. But when you're, looking to start something new with a small group of people, like the costs and the difficulties of the ocean are really tough. And so that's why in 2011, the country of Honduras announced kind of a first of its kind program in the world where a company could work with the country to create a new type of special economic zone where the company gets to actually write the laws and administer the government for the vast majority of types of law, like things that would normally be at the national level. So most special economic zones, most people aren't familiar with it, but it's a government says, okay, in this area, we're not going to apply our 50%.
Can I stop you for a second, Patri? I just want to say what you're doing now is you're explaining like those were the log jams you hit with seasteading, and now what your
Yes.
attention turns to? I just want to make sure
Yeah,
people aren't like
exactly.
still keeping track of the seasteading. It's like, how does Honduras fit? Okay, so that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So
Okay.
then, we were actually, my business partner and I were working on starting a medical tourism cruise ship company. We were like, okay, seasteading, we started the nonprofit, we got the word out, but what it really needs next is a business.
Right.
And we worked on that for a few months, and then Honduras made this announcement.
Okay.
And, in their program, unlike a normal special economic zone, is like, oh, well, we actually let foreign laborers work here, which we don't in the rest of our country. Or like we give you some tax breaks or some tariff breaks. It's little stuff. And in the Honduras program, inspired by work from economist Paul Romer and some things that Dubai did, the zone would actually have different laws, like different financial regulation, medical regulation, contract law, labor law, zoning, family law, all areas of what's called commercial law, while still using the Honduran criminal law. So think of things that are a crime, robbery, arson, all that stuff. And I was like, holy crap, this thing that I want to do, which is experiment with new types of societies and legal systems and, show that we can make a much more efficient, responsive government that is like your partner instead of your opponent. Like, here's an opportunity to do this without having to deal with the cost of the ocean. So I started working with them then, and that these what's called charter city programs that Honduras pioneered have been my focus for the last 10 or 15 years.
Okay. So just to expand a little bit on that, I mean, should we continue to focus on Honduras specifically, or did that spawn and like you think there's a better representative? Yeah.
Well, there's still, they created that program in 2011. Now it's 2025. And there's still is not another one of these programs in the world, although we're getting very close in a bunch of countries. When I worked with Honduras, we worked on them for a year, and we realized like it was just going to take them years to actually get this thing operational, right? I mean, they're trying to do something really new and difficult. For example, they changed their constitution to create this program, but they didn't have budget because, in the global South, it can actually be harder to get money, which is in short supply, than to change their constitution and create this groundbreaking law. And so we saw that it wasn't going to happen, and, wound up shop, turned money to investors, and, because we've been working to try to build one of these cities there. And then, some like 5 years later, a company called Honduras Prospera came along, and they worked with the country to finish the program and, do all of the legal plumbing necessary to roll it out. And Honduras approved 3 of these zones, of which Prospera is one. So it opens its doors in 2020 on the island of Roatan, which is in the Caribbean. It's a world-class scuba diving, snorkeling destination, one of the largest barrier reefs in the world. So they opened their doors in 2020, and what my role in things at that point, I saw that this stuff was actually finally happening. There'd been kind of pause in the 2010s after Honduras announced its program, but then it took them years to implement it, and no one else was ready to do it yet. But, coming on 2018, 2019, 2020, it was like, wow, this is happening. Prospera is like about to launch. So I raised a small investment fund to focus only on these types of projects. So, it's called Pronomus Capital. Peter Thiel is my largest investor. Got people like Joe Lonsdale, Naval Ravikant, Balaji Srinivasan, Tim Ferriss, great people investing in projects like this to try to create these cities. And so there's kind of more and more companies, more and more countries who are, in some cases debating the national legislation to make it happen. But we haven't gotten a second one across the finish line yet.
Okay, so Prospera is up and running though?
Yeah, since 2020, and
right,
it's kind of found a lot of its focus to be on medical innovation.
Yeah, because I'm looking. I interviewed a guy that was intimately involved with it. His name is escaping me at the moment. I'm trying to find it, and Google's failing me. Like it keeps thinking I'm saying Bob Murphy Prosperity, and that's not what I'm looking. Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just saying that, yeah, so we're talking about the same project.
Yes, absolutely. So medical innovation has been a major thing there.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 3 different medical procedures there.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chip put into my hand that unlocks my Tesla, and people can tap for my business card, just like you would bump phones together.
Mm-hmm.
I had gene therapy that improved my VO2 max, my cardio performance, by as much in a week as 3 months of training. And I had my mouth bacteria replaced with a different type of mouth bacteria that'll make it so I never get cavities.
Well, this interview took a turn. I didn't know there was going to be this part. Are there other? I'm not trying to put you on this, but are there other things on the offing that are going to like make you a metahuman?
I mean, I'm working on it. This is why people like Brian Johnson are going down and spending a lot of time in Prospera. And yeah, it's.
So can I ask you on that stuff? So he is doing that. Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian, he had the same gene therapy.
Now, can you just explain and unpack that a little bit? Is it just because like it's cheaper and safe? Whereas like in terms of those two,
it's in the US and the EU, it takes on average $1 billion in 10 years to get a drug approved. It didn't used to be like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's because that process is so slow and so expensive. There's all kinds of new treatments that, like, especially for people who are really interested in the topic, if you're into like longevity technology, like people are comfortable with doing these treatments based on the data so far and their knowledge of the space, but it's completely illegal to do in most countries because of their FDA, and then here and the same equivalent for the EU and Australia, like in most major countries.
Okay, so is this a true statement? If somebody did want to just get whatever open heart surgery, it would, in terms of the combination of safety of the procedure and cost, it would probably be attractive to do it there. But you're saying the real sweet spot is things that in an absolute term are very expensive, but it's because the price is infinity everywhere else. So it still is the cheapest place to go on earth.
It's close. The model that, it's, the model that I would use is that you're probably either going to compete by offering the treatments you can get at home cheaper and better, or by offering treatments that you can't get at home. And Prospera is right now mainly specializing in the treatments you can't get at home, stuff that's brand new.
Right.
But like when I was looking into doing a medical tourism cruise ship that same year in 2011, we were looking at, there's already this huge field of people flying to other countries to get medical procedures for a third the price. I mean, there's even some insurers in the US that will cover it because it saves them money.
Right.
I mean, they don't care that you get it in the broken US healthcare system. They just care that you get it. So it's a huge thing where you have doctors from the global South who in many cases have had just as good an education, but whose salary is a quarter as much, and so I think that there is a lot of potential for competing on that like cost side. It's just, Prospera has mainly appealed to innovators so far, I would say.
Okay. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because you were explaining earlier, like how the oil rig works as a model, but that's because, there's crude oil flowing up and that's got a high, value per volume. But I was wondering if you like surgeries for people and it's not that they're staying on the ship, like you could have even choppers coming or, speedboats bringing them and just keep rotating.
You totally get it. And this is why some of my friends had a project where they were looking to do like anchor a residential ship like off of San Francisco and have like coders from the global South. So you'd have like a development team, where it would be like $25K a year per person instead of like 150. But the issue is that, $25K a year versus 150. So like each of those cabins plus workspace plus infrastructure is supporting like 125K a year creation of value. But like, if you're getting a 40K hip replacement for 20K and you need to stay in that room for like 2 weeks before you're able to like disembark and go back on land, 2 weeks, you do that 26 times a year times 20K. Now we're talking about like 500,000 plus. Like the value density of like how much value are you creating per amount of space, like per unit time. You have to have that high because the ocean is expensive. So if you're doing anything with a ship, it has to be value dense.
Okay.
Your intuition for this is really good, Bob.
Well, thank you. Okay. Is there an issue too where it's a kind of thing, like, I'm sure there are enough highly productive people who happen to live on planet Earth. If you put them all on some tiny little floating platform, they could generate enough. But the point is right now they're very wealthy and they wouldn't all want to go move to this little platform. Is that an issue too?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, across all of these movements, including charter cities, this challenge of like getting people to move someplace, it is a big issue. And like growth of the residential population of Prospera has been very slow. For several years, there was almost nobody living there full time. It's only in the last like year and a half that's changed. And I think part of the reason is it's easy to get people out there for a week. It's not even that hard to get them out there for a month. But to move to this like remote tropical, I mean, it's got good flight connections to the US, but it's still a tiny tropical island. Like your access to restaurants and stuff like that is very low. And that's a hard sell.
Yeah. Well, that's what my follow-up was going to be then, like in terms of if you're doing the medical tourism model, even the cardiologists or the heart surgeons or whatever, can they rotate in and out too? So like really it's like, oh, you go do a 3-month stint in Prospera, but then you spend.
I mean, they do this. This is how people do this on ships all the time. They go out for a certain stint.
Okay. So but
then they get stir crazy, right? And they have to get out and see the open air and be able to pick from, different bars owned by different people.
Right. So, I mean, I guess, yeah. Cause I wrote a novel in grad school about, anarchotopia, blah, 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 on an island and stuff. And I was thinking through, like, once it reached a critical mass in my version, and I do want to ask you this in a second, but I'll finish this train of thought. It was like, once they proved to the world they could fend off a military attack from a conventional state, then it was like a lot of more people started moving in. And then it was like a snowball effect. This kind of thing. If you're a wealthy, I don't know, mergers and acquisitions lawyer in Chicago or New York, even if you could make 50% more because of no taxes or whatever by moving to this dinky little island somewhere.
Right.
Like at some point you say, well, I don't have the restaurants. And it's like, well, how would you get all the good restaurant? And it's the kind of thing like once more and more people started moving, then it would be a snowball, but how do you get it going?
Here's part of my answer to this is something that happened in El Salvador when Bukele like cleaned up crime so drastically is that you had El Salvadorian people like moving back from Manhattan because they were like, rather than being an M&A lawyer in Manhattan, I'd rather open a restaurant in El Salvador now that people aren't getting killed in front of me. And so I think that this reverse diaspora with charter cities, a lot of my work is in Africa, mostly West Africa, working with a bunch of countries there on these types of projects. And I think they can do a lot of good.
Okay. Well, all right. You just walked into the next one. Well, let me ask you before I forget. How do you feel? Is the military thing something like? Is there a kind of deal where people just use game theory and say if this thing were to work, it would get conquered?
So,
but is that partly why you're not getting that? Is what I'm asking. Like there are a bunch of serious people that are like, look, it sounds great, but if it took off, some state would just invade it 10 years from now. So no, I'm not going to relocate there. Like, does anyone think that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a significant concern of investors. And in fact, in the case of Honduras Prospera, after the government supporting the program for 12 years or something, the people got sick of the conservatives and they voted in like an actual Marxist who like restored relations with Venezuela and like cozies up to Venezuela and Cuba and China. They kicked out the Taiwan embassy. And I think those people seem to see Prospera and this program as like their ideological enemy. And so the president actually made like a campaign promise to try to shut it down. But they haven't been able to because the program was set up in the country's constitution in, a very solid way. And so it's been almost 4 years now, and Prosper's still active, still running. So we are getting some fire testing. And what I would say is like, yeah, I agree that people definitely trust something a lot more if it's been through fire testing. But as far as like phases, look, my North Star is I want to start new countries, right? And whether it's seasteading or charter cities, this is like a step on the road to starting new countries. But
Right.
A new country is a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's things like the military. You're going to have diplomatic relations with a bunch of countries, and we're too new and we're too small for that. In a charter city, you're under the country's constitution and treaties. You're under their sovereignty, so you're getting to plug into international law and have like really meaningful authority to write most of the laws that apply in your zone. It's a little bit like Hong Kong. Um, it's like one country, two systems. So you have this different system, but they handle the military, they handle passports and visas and those things. And it's great. Like I feel I've never been more optimistic about this stuff happening and us being able to eventually build, a bunch of different kinds of city states around the world. It's because we have this great like halfway step where
Right.
we're not having to carve out a new place in the international order. We're working with existing countries, generally small countries who want jobs. They want companies to come in and hire them and improve the economy. Like that's what it's about for them. Yeah. And so, yeah,
Okay.
that's
So,
what it's about.
okay, great. So, all right. So you did fill in some details there of things that I don't need to ask now, but let me circle back. You had mentioned how like you're interested. Did you say West Africa? Is that when? So I heard a talk from somebody. It was one of those like investor guys that like goes to Freedom Fest. It was one of those guys years ago, and he was kind of just ruminating and saying, it's kind of a paradox. Like you would think, like you understand why even a bunch of billionaires who go read Ayn Rand or something can't convince the mayor of New York City to do something because there's so much opposition. But you would think some well-heeled capitalists go into a pretty like a third world country, like the turnaround. Like if the way you and I view the world is even 10% right, you would think there's just so much money on the table. Like how come that's not happening? Like you get what I'm saying? Like someone just coming in and cutting deals and just transforming the thing, and then that potentate, becomes a billionaire and goes and retires somewhere else. And what does he care? He doesn't have any ideology. Like you just buy the guy off or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, can you just speak to that? Like, so why is this not happening more? And why didn't it happen 50 years ago?
I mean, it's really hard. And, you're going against some powerful human instincts. Like, there's a reason that, every now and then someone's like, why don't you fund a coup? Why don't you take over a country or buy out a country? They're like, this country only has 20,000 people in it. But like, I think anything that feels to people like taking away or stealing their homeland, like that's a big deal. That's why we are only looking at like purely voluntary relationships. And so, and it's hard, right? I mean, look at what it took to get Israel started, for example, like, decades and decades, like more than a half century of like organizing and spreading this idea before they got a chance to make it happen. Like, this stuff is really hard. I mean, as far as why, I get frustrated, I've been frustrated the whole time I've been doing this about the difference in how much funding goes to, things like think tanks versus like projects like mine. Like there's definitely benefit to think tanks, but is like the 70 millionth dollar, like once you've already given like 70 million to think tanks for a year in total, like is like the 71st million really going to do like more good by producing an extra few policy papers than like moving along the path to try to start new countries? Like it, like having 2 million a year instead of like 1 million a year from like Peter and a few other people. It's frustrating, but I think that it's really hard to find people willing to bet on new things. I mean, that's why Peter Thiel is such an exceptional person who's made so many things happen, is that there's people who are like, oh, that's cool, I get it. There's people who understand new ideas and innovation, but actually putting their money and their reputation, behind something like new and weird, that some people will be like, that's amazingly cool. Some people will be like, are you crazy? It's turned out to be, a lot more difficult.
Hey everybody, Bob Murphy here with a quick tip for small business owners. If your business isn't showing up online, your competitors are getting the leads and you're missing out. Well, that's where Persist SEO comes in. For over 15 years, they've been helping local businesses grow through SEO, paid ads, and the latest in AI-powered search optimization, so you stay visible and competitive in the digital age. Whether you're in-home services, legal, or healthcare, Persist SEO delivers real results without locking you into long-term contracts or overwhelming you with tech jargon. Visit ineedseo.help or call 770-580-3736 to schedule your free consultation. That's ineedseo.help. Easy to remember, powerful for your business. Okay, so let me just throw this framing at you and just have you respond. So I was really excited for, like, when Uber came on the scene, and I wasn't the first person to say this, but I heard somebody say it and then I kind of took it and ran with it, that libertarian types and, right-wing free market guys have been writing for decades about, the taxi cab, the medallion system they use, and it's a cartel and it raises prices and reduces quality for, motorists, right, and blah, blah, blah. And they, the cabbies will always talk about how it's customer safety and we can't just have anybody driving gypsy cabs around and blah, blah, blah. But Uber just coming in and doing it, and everyone using their phone and just seeing the convenience, and it's cheaper, cleaner cabs. You're not getting assaulted or kidnapped by your driver. Everybody, there's a rating system. Everyone knows it's all just
USB cable.
Yeah. So just to see that was way better than just the white papers and making those points theoretically, just for people to see it. And so then when I heard about like the Prospera and these things like this, I thought, okay, well, great. We just need one or two examples of it working.
Yes.
And then all the people can see that. And then again, like if we, like the way you and I think, there's a certain jurisdiction, there's policies in place that are making it like only 10% of its possible net wealth. So how is that not exploding?
Yet,
why? But why?
Because we haven't quite proven it. We've got some sparks that have caught in the tinder, but the fire is not burning.
Okay, but in the analogy, is it that Uber did open up in Phoenix and then a bunch of people did kidnap their customers, or it's like the cars broke down? So what's an analog?
In the analogy, this is more like Uber has like launched in one city and it hasn't caught on yet because they're still refining their product. That's where the charter city movement is at. Like we don't like what you need a functioning economy that's like companies want to come in because they can get workers, and there's something where like if you're a company and you want to open a manufacturing facility in whatever, Vietnam or, the Congo, now you got to worry about like, what are the local laws that protect this? Like, how do I figure it out? How do I pay people? Does the financial system work? How much corruption is there? And, the idea is that we're going to create zones. It's like, no, this is like developed world quality, like low corruption, effective law, like infrastructure that works. And I think that's going to be very attractive to people.
Okay, so I misunderstood you. When you said the analog is Uber just launched in Phoenix and it hasn't caught on yet, I thought you meant other cities. That you meant even within Phoenix, like for Uber to work, people have to download the app on their phone and even know it's a thing, and then drivers have to know to register.
Find it better enough that it's viral and that more people are using it every week. Like, we're starting to have some of those growth metrics in Prospera, but it's pretty recent, and nobody else has even gotten to like the starting line of working with the country, passing the laws and signing the partnership agreements. But there's, easily like 5 companies, maybe even 10, who have a solid shot at, launching in the next year or two. So I think we're close to the cusp where, it's working just well enough. It's working well enough in Honduras that other countries are intrigued and working on the legislation
Okay.
and working with, the companies that I fund. But none of them have gotten to this, pretty difficult step of getting everything signed and passed into law.
Okay. And then too, as far, just to go back to the issue of like, would somebody conquer it, or even the existing, like you were mentioning, if the Marxist regime takes over, presumably like a countervailing.
Not if, Bob, they did take. I mean, they took
Right.
they took over by winning an election. Like,
Yeah, right.
But
where I'm going is though that besides just fortunately you had your constitutional safeguards, but even beyond that,
the mechanism. It's actually fascinating. It's one of the few cases in the world where like it's something that an economist might have designed that's like actually used. So, it's as if all of a country's assets that are held in other jurisdictions, bank accounts, property, you have a government-owned business, whatever, getting oil and selling it someplace else, like those accounts receivable, all of a country's assets that are in other countries is like a bond that they've posted that they can be sued for. And the way it works is that and Prospera is suing Honduras for $10 billion under this system, which was just an estimate if they continued raising money and growing for 10 years at the rate that they had been, how much it would be worth. So this case is, slowly, it's a years long process, marching its way through the courts. But the way it works is that you sue them in under an investor state dispute treaty network, which almost all countries are in. And if you win an award, if they say, okay, this cost you $125 million, you can take that award to any other country and just seize the country's assets.
Okay.
So you can take their bank accounts. If they're selling products to another country, you can it's like garnishing someone's wages.
Right.
You can be like, nope, those payments go to me until this 125 million is paid off. It's actually like a really neat system. So you don't depend on the country, and you don't depend on its courts at all. Okay. One thing that's I think is the funniest thing about this is, so Honduras, now being run by a Marxist and being sued. And not just by Prospera, Honduras is being sued by more companies than any other country in the world right now. Like it was the most in the world when it was 11. I think it might be like 18 by now for last time I checked. Mm-hmm. So she's pulled out of the main investor state dispute resolution network, which is called ICSID, which doesn't get her out of the lawsuit. Like obviously you would never create something like this where you could just leave it. That wouldn't work. But as far as future lawsuits, she's left this network. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Honduras is cozying up to China because it's a Marxist. So like they kicked out the Taiwanese embassy, and China was talking about, giving them a big loan to build some infrastructure, which is what they do to exert their influence around the world. And so Honduras pulls out of ICSID, being like, these evil capitalists are trying to, take our poor people's money. Mm-hmm. And China says, guys, we can't loan you the money. We can't loan you the money unless you're in an investor dispute resolution network. Because how would we get it back if you didn't pay? So it's like even their new commie buddies, like this system is so core to the functioning of like all cross-border investment in the world that like even China is insisting on it. Okay. Which I just think is hilarious.
That's
like
great,
they tried to pull out of it, like, you capitalists, like, you're not gonna be able to sue us. The commies are like, we need to be able to sue you.
Right. Okay. So like in terms of the game theory, just like there's, scenarios where if you could take away your future moves, like you could benefit from, you know what I mean? Like you could join into agreement. So that's what partly why a country would enter into this on the front end, even knowing down the road we actually want to take away our ability to defect.
You're exactly. It's if bankruptcy is too easy, no one's ever going to loan you money.
Right.
Like without enforcement mechanisms, we're screwed. Like we can't. There's most kinds of voluntary cooperation like don't work. Like some things are self-enforcing, but like most things aren't. And so yeah, without being able to have those, so it's like even a sovereign wants to be able to bind itself. I mean, again, literally, like, you know, we live in a world full. I mean, I'm not going to say that all deals that corporations make to go like extract resources are fair. Like, you know, they're not all fair, but in general, they're bringing in capital and expertise in order to like extract value, like some of which they share with the country. And all of that activity in the world, whether it's, you know, Apple manufacturing iPhones in China or whatever, like that depends on this system that I'm describing. And so it's not it's not invented for or by charter cities. It's not like some small thing that we're depending on. It's like an integral part of global trade.
Okay. And then I would imagine, like with the rise of blockchain and smart contracts and the breakdown, I think the US, I think, is going to be not as powerful vis-a-vis the rest of the world 10 years from now. I would think a more multipolar world would encourage the kind of thing you're talking about, where nobody can just flip the table over. And so there actually is like a global rule of law.
Yeah. And I guess you know, if you wanted to make the like Steelman the concern, you know, it would be, well, maybe this is actually an artifact of, you know, the American half century, you know, post World War II order where Pax Americana reigns supreme.
Right.
Like
the rules-based global order, whatever the heck phrase they use.
Will it still work when, you know, now that Pax Americana is ending? You know, I think that's a legitimate concern. But I also completely agree with you as far as on the demand side, like in a more multipolar order, you're right, that becomes even more important.
Okay, well, we're coming up here on the time I had asked you for. I'm sure people are intrigued. Where should they go if they want to, like, I don't know, did you have a TED Talk you did, or you got a website? Where should people go if they want to learn more about this?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of great podcasts on YouTube where I explore different aspects of this, and then they can follow on Twitter. I'm Patrissimo on Twitter, or the venture fund web Twitter is Pronomos VC, Pronomos VC. And so that's a great place to see updates on our companies and what's happening. And we're going to have a lot more stuff coming out second half of this year as far as learnings from the 5 years that I've been investing in these companies, you know, short videos explaining the basics of all these things for people who are new to it. So now's a great time to subscribe.
Okay. Well, thanks, folks. My guest has been Patri Friedman. Patri, thanks so much for coming on the show, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.